Check your bag. That's all the message said. No punctuation. No name. Just 3 words on her lock screen. She tilted the phone slightly, squinting, then tapped it off, pretending I hadn't seen it. But I had. I saw her pulse flutter just beneath her jawline. Her thumb hesitated before she zipped her handbag tighter and crossed her legs in that composed, too casual way she always defaulted to when she was about to lie. We were sitting in the Delta Sky Club at Gate 52. Her meeting was in 90 minutes. She had just ordered a second cappuccino she didn't need and barely touched the first. I wasn't supposed to be there. She didn't know I had rerouted my flight to land just an hour before hers. She didn't know I was watching everything. I waited in silence. I watched her glance around, quick, sharp glances like someone expecting a delivery or a surprise. She didn't notice me in the far corner, behind the half-wall of white orchids and overpriced modern art. That's the problem with people who lie. They look too far ahead. They never check the shadows behind them. Finally, she reached for the bag. Her movements were slow, almost mechanical. She pulled the zipper down just 2 inches, then paused. Her hand slipped inside, fingers feeling around cautiously, the way you'd check for something you lost but were afraid to find. Then she stopped moving completely. I saw the shift in her eyes. Her lips parted just slightly, no breath coming out. She wasn't blinking. She wasn't breathing. Just staring into her purse like it had betrayed her. Then she pulled it out. A ring. My ring. The one she said I must have misplaced in the gym weeks ago. The one I never stopped wearing. It had sat in her bag for 4 hours now, beneath her wallet and that emergency lipstick she always carried. And right beneath the ring, curled like a resting leaf, was a piece of paper folded 3 times. She hesitated again, looked around, then unfolded it under the table, just beneath the edge of her designer tote. I watched her read, and when her eyes reached the last line, she dropped the paper. Not on purpose. Not for drama. Her fingers literally failed her. It floated awkwardly down beside her heel, resting just near the base of her shoe. She didn't pick it up. She just stared forward into nothing, into the space where the rest of her life had been 5 minutes ago. Behind her, on the window's reflection, I watched her try to hold it together. But she couldn't. And she had no idea that wasn't even the worst part. Not yet. She didn't notice the woman 2 seats behind her slowly lift a phone. Or maybe she did. Maybe she noticed everything and just didn't know where to look anymore. Because after she dropped that note, she didn't move for at least a full minute. She sat motionless, blinking but not seeing, as if someone had cut the power in her mind and she was still waiting for the lights to flicker back on. And then she finally did something so uncharacteristic I almost stood up. She laughed. A tiny, nervous, inappropriate laugh like someone watching their wedding cake fall in slow motion. Her lips pressed together immediately afterward, like she regretted letting that sound escape. And just as quickly, she stood up, grabbed the note, stuffed it back into the purse with force, her fingers trembling just enough to be noticeable to someone who knew her well, and unfortunately for her, I knew her better than she ever expected. She didn't know I was in the lounge. That was never part of her plan. Her plan, I realized, was built on the assumption that I'd be somewhere far away, probably wondering where I lost my wedding ring, maybe even gaslighting myself into thinking I was overthinking everything again. But what she never accounted for was that I stopped overthinking a long time ago. And I started recording instead. She walked out of the lounge quickly. No eye contact. No goodbye cappuccino. No stop at the mirror, which she never skipped. Her heels made a sharper sound on the marble floor than usual, the kind of sound people make when they're walking away from a fire they might have started. She didn't know her phone had already backed up every photo from the last 4 months to a shared cloud folder I still had access to. She didn't know I had the login to her secondary email account, the one she forgot she left open on the iPad we used for Netflix. And she really didn't know that the man she had booked a hotel with in Seattle, the man she labeled as Morgan F., investor contact, wasn't just waiting for her at the terminal. He had already read the message too. You see, I sent the same letter to both of them. Hers was hidden beneath the ring, neat, folded, private. His was printed in a cheap envelope and slid under the door of his airport hotel room that morning. Same words, same ink, same final sentence. You can have her. Just don't trust her. I didn't expect a response. I wasn't doing this for drama. I was doing it because the silence between us had become unbearable, and I wanted them to hear the weight of it all at once. I wanted them to know that this wasn't about catching someone red-handed. This wasn't about rage. It was about being tired, utterly, painfully tired of being invisible in my own marriage. She didn't cheat out of passion. She cheated out of convenience. Like I had become the last page in a manual she no longer needed. What she didn't expect, and what I hadn't planned either, was the confrontation that followed. Because not 30 minutes after she vanished from the lounge, I received a message. Not from her. From him. Morgan F. Sent a single text to the number I used to send the note. I had set up a burner line through a temporary app. He didn't know who it was at first. We need to talk. You were right. Meet me. I'll tell you something you don't know. And that's when I realized this story wasn't going to end in silence after all. There was more. There was something Merritt hadn't told him, either. I almost didn't reply to him. I thought it might be a trap, or worse, a pity meeting. Maybe he just wanted to see the damage up close, to measure the kind of man he'd replaced. But curiosity has teeth, and mine had been gnawing at me for weeks. So I responded. Name the place. He picked a location I didn't expect, a hotel bar inside the terminal, not the one Merritt was supposed to meet him at later that evening. I took my time walking there, hands stuffed in my pockets, hoodie pulled low, rehearsing different versions of what I'd say. None of them came out the way I planned. He was already sitting at the bar when I arrived, drink untouched, fingers nervously tapping against the stem of his glass. He looked younger than I thought he'd be. Maybe late 30s. Tall, manicured, but not overly polished. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and his phone was on the counter, buzzing repeatedly with texts he was clearly ignoring. I didn't sit next to him. I stood just behind him and said, quietly, "So, what don't I know?" He flinched. Turned. "You're Lowell?" he asked. I didn't answer. He didn't wait. "I didn't know she was married," he said. "Not until a week ago. She told me you were her brother's friend, that you lived with them for a while after a divorce." It hit me so hard I actually laughed. I laughed out loud. A short, stunned, dry laugh. Not even because it was funny, but because it was so wildly unoriginal. The oldest cover story in the book, make the husband sound like a couch-crashing has-been, not worth a second glance. I must have looked pathetic to her in whatever little life fantasy she built. Some lonely hanger-on who couldn't take a hint. "She's a great actress," I said, almost admiringly. "She deserves an award." But Morgan wasn't smiling. He looked sick, like he'd just walked out of a courtroom where he was the only one unaware he was the defendant. "I think she's been lying to both of us," he said. "There's something else, something weird. I didn't know how to process it until I got your message this morning." He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "She gave me this last week," he said. "Told me to keep it somewhere private. Said it was in case of emergency. I didn't open it until today." He handed it to me. I unfolded the paper slowly. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a contract. A life insurance contract. And Merritt had listed herself as the sole beneficiary on a private $750,000 policy Morgan had apparently signed during what she described to him as a corporate protection protocol for high-value consultants. He had no idea the paperwork had even gone through. "She told me it was a routine policy," he whispered. "But I checked. It's not tied to any company. It's personal." I couldn't feel my fingers. Not because she was cheating. That wound was old now. But because I was starting to see just how far she'd planned this. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about lust. This was about leverage. Assets. Control. And maybe something darker. Morgan leaned in, lowering his voice. "She told me you were sick. Terminally ill. That she was taking care of you because your family didn't want the burden." That was the moment everything shifted. She wasn't just rewriting her life, she was erasing me entirely. And if she was doing that to me, I had to ask, what was she planning to do to him? I sat across from Morgan, holding that piece of paper like it had heat coming off it. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My thoughts were speeding, but I couldn't catch a single one long enough to hold on to it. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the document. Her handwriting. I recognized the way she looped her R's like a music note. She used the same pen she kept in her desk, the silver one with the initials engraved on the clip. This wasn't fake. This was her. And she'd done it behind both our backs. Morgan wasn't trying to play the victim anymore. That smug distance I expected from him was gone. He wasn't the threat now. He was a piece of collateral, someone Merritt used like a pawn and discarded once he had signed what she needed. He looked down at his glass and finally took a sip. Then another. His hands were shaking now. "She lied to me about everything," he said, almost in disbelief. "I thought she was in love with me." I didn't say it out loud, but the phrase hit like a brick. She made us both think we were optional. I don't know how many versions of herself she created. Maybe we each got a different Merritt, one who wore pearls and made scones for me, and another who played the independent executive and fed Morgan fairy tales about widowed strength and private loss. She had perfected the art of omission. But life insurance? That was something else entirely. How long have you been seeing her? I finally asked. He hesitated. Almost a year. It started after that charity conference in Denver. She said she wasn't with anyone, that she'd been married, but it ended quietly. He swallowed hard. She showed me an obituary once. Said it was her ex-husband. He died from a neurological condition. Said it was sudden. I stared at him. A long, empty silence stretched between us. I'm that obituary, I said. His glass stopped midair. She used my name. My story. She's been rewriting it while I'm still breathing. He didn't respond for a long time. I think he was processing what kind of person he had fallen for, not just a cheater, not just a liar, but a full-blown manipulator who didn't just hide the truth. She replaced it. He reached for his phone and began scrolling through photos. There's something else, he said. I think she's been tracking you. I didn't know what I was looking at before, but I remember this photo from last month. She told me it was an old friend she ran into. He turned the phone around. It was me, sitting on a park bench, looking down at my watch. She took this from the car, he said. Zoomed in, cropped it, then laughed when I asked who it was. I felt something rise in my chest. Not panic, not even rage. Just a slow, suffocating dread. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She was amused by the idea. She was so sure of her control, of her acting, of our ignorance, that she'd been documenting me like a character in her personal drama. I think you should see this too, Morgan added, unlocking his email. He tapped through a few folders and opened one labeled House Docs. She sent me these 3 nights ago, he said. Told me we should start preparing for a shared life. I didn't open them until today. The attachments loaded. One was a scanned version of our apartment lease with her name forged over mine. Another was a power of attorney document listing Morgan as an emergency contact for all medical and estate decisions. And the third was a moving quote from a long-distance relocation company, scheduled for next Thursday, destination, Seattle. My mouth went dry. She was leaving, but not fleeing. She was erasing me. Legally, logistically, financially. She was transferring our life, my home, my records, my assets, into a future she had designed with a man she had convinced I was already dead. That's when I realized I wasn't just watching the end of a marriage. I was watching my life get rewritten in real time, and she nearly pulled it off. But she made one mistake. She never expected me to show up at that lounge. And she never expected Morgan to turn against her. And neither of them, not yet, knew what I had just sent to her employer. By the time Morgan closed his laptop and rubbed his temples like he was trying to erase the memory of everything, I had already sent the email. Not to her. Not to Morgan. Not to anyone who'd ever met me personally. No, this one went to her employer's legal compliance team, a department I'd researched meticulously in the past week, the moment I realized something was off with the contract I found in our shared documents folder. Merritt had used her work printer to prepare private legal documents. I had timestamps. Metadata. She had signed policies for Morgan, fake rental forms, even a version of my own forged signature on a joint asset transfer letter, all done during office hours, logged under a company login. The company she worked for prided itself on ethics and discretion. They had no idea one of their own was building a fabricated life on company hardware. So I packaged it. Screenshots. Time logs. A copy of the insurance file. Even a PDF of the photograph Morgan had shown me. The one Merritt took of me on the bench, like I was some ghost she was collecting evidence on. The subject line of my email read, Employee conduct violation, multiple fraudulent documents, and personal liability exposure. I didn't use threatening language. I wasn't looking for revenge. I simply asked, politely, if their legal team was aware that an employee in a leadership role was drafting false legal documents using company equipment, fabricating stories about spousal death, and potentially drawing a financial partner into a fraudulent insurance agreement. I didn't sign the email with my name, but I attached everything they needed to trace it back to her. As Morgan and I parted ways, him still dazed, me barely holding myself together, I told him one thing. Whatever happens next, you decide how much of your name stays tied to her. He nodded. He understood. He had a chance to disappear now. Something I hadn't taken soon enough. I didn't go home. Home wasn't mine anymore. I had transferred the lease 2 days before the lounge meeting. Everything I owned had been moved into storage. I left only one item behind on the kitchen table, a sealed envelope with my initials on it, containing the only photograph we ever took that I actually liked. It was from the first year of our marriage. We were in Maine, at a lighthouse. She had just made a dumb joke about seagulls. I looked happy in it. Really happy. And real. I left it for her because I wanted her to see something she no longer had the ability to manufacture, something authentic. I didn't expect to hear from her again. She wasn't the type to beg. But I was wrong. Exactly 3 days later, I received a message from an unknown number. It wasn't a voicemail. It wasn't even a real call. It was a short video message, no caption, no explanation. Just 7 seconds long. I nearly didn't open it. But I did. It was Merritt. She was sitting in her car, outside her office building. Her face pale. She looked completely different, like her spine had folded in on itself. Behind her, you could hear a security guard knocking on the window, telling her she had to move the car. She whispered only one thing into the camera. "I know what you did." She didn't look angry. She looked terrified. And for the first time in all of this, I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to feel. She thought she was untouchable. She thought I was too quiet, too passive, too soft to do anything that would leave a mark. But now the illusion she built, the narrative she crafted like a screenplay, had collapsed in her hands, and she was standing in the debris of it alone. That video was sent at 9:03 a.m. At 9:17 a.m., I received a second message. It wasn't from her. It was from her mother. The message from her mother came in the form of a voicemail. No text, no greeting. Just a simple "call me" in the subject line and a phone number I hadn't saved since 2019. I almost deleted it. I didn't know that woman anything. She and Merritt were cut from the same cloth, cold, composed, always knowing what to say, but never saying anything real. But something about the timing made me pause. I sat on the edge of my motel bed, staring at the dim light bleeding through the window blinds, and played the message. "Lowell," she said, her voice low, worn, like she'd already been crying, which was new. "I don't know what you found, but she's unraveling. I came home yesterday and found her sitting on the floor in my foyer. She hasn't eaten. She won't tell me what happened, but she keeps saying your name. If you've done something to frighten her, I need to know what it is." I nearly laughed out loud. Frighten her? After what she'd done to me? After everything she tried to erase? But her mother wasn't finished. She told me. She told me something that doesn't make sense. She said she thought you were going to die, that you had a condition, that she had started preparing to move on before the worst happened. That stopped me cold. I sat upright, the blood in my arms draining like someone had opened a valve. She thought I was going to die? She told her mother that? Now I wasn't angry. I was disturbed. I never had a condition. No illness. No warning signs. I had gone for a physical just 3 months ago. Clean slate. Normal everything. The only time I ever missed a doctor's appointment was back in January, when Merritt forgot to forward the email reminder. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But now I started connecting pieces I never thought to link before. The strange prescriptions in our cabinet I never remembered requesting. The insurance card she insisted she renewed for both of us and handed me already laminated. The single appointment she scheduled for me with her friend specialist, a neurologist I never ended up visiting because the guy canceled last minute. I'd forgotten all about it. That was 4 months ago. What if she hadn't just been lying about me? What if she'd been constructing a medical history for me? One that would justify a claim. One that would explain why a wife would need a life insurance payout. And if that was true, if she had actually begun planting the seeds of a fake terminal illness, how far was she planning to take it? My hands started shaking. I didn't know what scared me more, the fact that she was willing to lie to every person in her life, or the thought that maybe she was prepared to take it a step further. Something beyond lies. Something irreversible. I didn't respond to her mother. I didn't need to. Instead, I contacted a friend of mine, Nate, a quiet guy, ex-cybersecurity engineer. He owed me a favor from years back when I covered some legal fees after a failed startup of his. I gave him Merritt's name, her email, and a few details about what I suspected. I asked him one thing. If there's a paper trail that points to her building a fake medical profile for me, I need to see it. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Give me 48 hours. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my hoodie still on, staring at the motel ceiling, wondering how long she had been living like this, balancing her entire world on one lie after another. I wondered if she ever truly loved me at all, or if I'd simply been a convenient prop in a story that she rewrote every 6 months to fit her next opportunity. I thought about the way she used to sit on our balcony, staring at the skyline like she was waiting for something to change. Maybe she never wanted a husband. Maybe she wanted a blank canvas to paint over and over, until she felt powerful enough to frame it and hang it up as her own masterpiece. But even paintings crack with time. And Merritt was cracking. The next morning, I got a ping from Nate. He'd found something. 2 years ago, she submitted an anticipatory claim inquiry through a smaller private insurance firm under a false name. Same birth date as mine, same address, same social ID number with just 1 digit swapped. She was preparing for a payout before I even knew she had doubts. She wasn't watching me fade. She was writing my death before I ever stopped breathing. I didn't leave the motel that day. After Nate's message, I just sat at the edge of the bed, holding my phone like it was the last object tethering me to reality. I kept rereading his report. The forged identity. The swapped digit in my social security number. The address variation that pointed to a vacant unit in a building we almost moved into 3 years ago. She'd used that address, a place we never lived in, as the residence of this fictional version of me. A ghost Lowell. And the most disturbing part? The fake ghost had a medical file attached to the profile. Not real records, but a fabricated note trail describing neurological decline, disorientation, fainting episodes. Things I had never once experienced. But they were written up and time-stamped by someone using the alias of a traveling doctor. A name Nate couldn't tie to any real person with a license in the U.S. Merritt had even attached a medical scan. Where she got that from, I have no idea. The level of premeditation sent a cold ripple through my ribs. She wasn't just plotting a new life. She was architecting a death, mine. Not physically, perhaps. Not violently. But in paperwork. In databases. In financial systems. She was burying me under digital records until I no longer existed on paper, and by then, the money would be hers. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there thinking about every birthday card she wrote. The small ones. The little messages like, "You're my favorite person on this planet." Was that ever real? Or had she been practicing her handwriting for forged signatures? At 3:42 p.m., I received a second email from Nate. It had one line in the body. "You should go to the apartment." She hid something. Attached was a time-stamped photo from an older cloud backup. One Merritt had carelessly synced 2 years ago before locking her devices tighter than a vault. It showed a manila folder sitting behind the mirror in the hallway closet. The mirror was one of those slide-ins, tucked behind the coats. We used it maybe twice a year. The folder was visible only if you crouched down and looked from a specific angle. I didn't want to go back there. That apartment felt like a crime scene now. But I had to. I parked 3 blocks away. I still had the spare key. I hadn't turned it in yet. When I stepped inside, it smelled empty. Not dirty. Just like a hotel room that used to hold memories. The last bits of her presence were gone. No scent. No photographs. No books. She hadn't just packed her things. She had sterilized the place. Like nothing human had ever lived there. I went to the hallway closet. Slid the coats aside. Pulled open the mirror panel. And there it was. The folder wasn't thick, but it was dense. Everything inside was carefully labeled, organized. There were printed emails between her and a legal contact named Anders C. The domain was masked, encrypted. In those emails, she was asking about how to legally restructure estate documents in cases where a domestic partner becomes mentally unfit. She was asking about removal without consent. One sentence stood out so sharply I had to sit down. If he becomes increasingly disoriented, can I initiate guardianship even without full diagnosis, as long as I provide supporting anecdotal records from friends or neighbors? I felt nauseous. She had been planning to declare me incompetent. Merritt, the woman I had made waffles for on our anniversary, the woman I stayed up nursing when she had the flu, the woman I trusted with every piece of my life, had been laying the groundwork to make me legally silent. And the worst part? She almost pulled it off. Beneath those emails were documents I hadn't seen before. Signed letters from a private legal consultancy granting her exploratory access to shared assets under what they called protective interest. I didn't know such a clause existed, but she had executed it. Quietly. Precisely. Behind my back. It meant one thing. If I had gone just one step slower, if I hadn't left the ring in her purse or sent that email to her company, there would have been nothing left in my name. No identity to prove. No truth to defend. Just the version she created. I left the apartment with the folder in my hands. I drove for hours. I didn't even know where I was heading until I got there. Her mother's house. I didn't knock at first. I sat in the car outside, watching the windows. One light was on. A shadow passed across the blinds. And then the front door opened. She was standing there. Merritt. No makeup. Hair tied back. Her eyes locked onto mine like she had expected this moment, but feared it more than anything in her life. And slowly, she stepped out into the light, barefoot on the porch. I opened the car door, but I didn't take a step forward. I held the folder up, just enough for her to see it. And then I said, without raising my voice, "You were going to bury me alive." She didn't say a word at first, just stood there on the porch, barefoot, frozen, as if the world around her had vanished, and she was trying to piece together where exactly it all unraveled. I didn't feel anger anymore, not even fear. Just a strange, weightless clarity, like standing in the middle of an emptied room where you once lived and realizing it's over. "I didn't," she finally whispered, but then stopped. Her mouth couldn't finish the sentence because she knew. She knew I knew everything. I stepped forward and handed her the folder. Not threw, not shoved. Just offered it calmly, like someone returning a book they never finished reading. She looked down at it with trembling fingers, like it was radioactive. "I don't need revenge," I said, "but I need you to understand what you almost did to me. And I need you to understand that I got out before you finished." Her eyes welled up. I expected that, but it didn't soften me. I had felt enough softness in this marriage to fill 100 apologies. What I needed now was peace. "I've sent the documents to your employer, your legal advisor, and Morgan," I continued. "Everything. If anyone tries to use this folder against me again, if I so much as see another forged signature or fake insurance form, I have a lawyer prepared to make sure you never touch another protected asset again." She stepped back, like my voice had pushed her. "You were always too quiet," she said. I thought you'd never fight back." "I didn't," I replied. "I just left. And then I walked away." It wasn't explosive. No screaming. No dramatic exit. Just the clean, final click of a car door shutting behind a man who finally, chose his own freedom over someone else's narrative. That was 3 months ago. Since then, a lot has changed. Her company placed her on indefinite suspension while they reviewed the misuse of legal documentation. Morgan cut all contact and left the country, apparently to work on a startup in New Zealand. Her mother sent me a letter, a real one, handwritten, saying she'd always suspected Merritt was building something dangerous around her, but never had the courage to stop it. As for me, I moved into a small house near a lake about 2 hours outside Cincinnati. It's quiet here. Clean air. Honest mornings. I started teaching architectural design part-time at a community college. It doesn't pay much, but it gives me something I forgot I needed. Connection. Real, honest connection. I don't look over my shoulder anymore. I don't check the mail and expect ghosts. Most days I take a walk in the evening, just as the sky turns orange, and I think about the version of me she tried to erase. I used to mourn him, but now, I think maybe he needed to go. Because the version that replaced him, the one who stood in front of her, steady and unshaken, that's the man I actually wanted to be all along. Sometimes, healing doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes, it shows up quietly, in a home that's your own, in coffee that's brewed the way you like it, in waking up and realizing your story doesn't need to be rewritten by anyone else ever again. It just needs to be yours. And finally it is.